Downing Street's confirmed that the Prime Minister won't apologise for his false claim that Sir Keir Starmer failed to prosecute the sex offender Jimmy Savile. Boris Johnson's facing fresh calls from MPs to say sorry after protesters ambushed and verbally abused the Holborn MP outside Parliament last night. Speaking exclusively to ITV News London, one of Savile's victims told us she's shocked by the Prime Minister's actions. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has the latest.
Why aren't you standing up for our Constitution?
Being heckled goes with the job if you're a politician, but in the words of the Commons Speaker, this was threatening and intimidating. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and the Tottenham MP David Lammy were confronted by an angry mob on a Westminster pavement. Someone shouted, "Protecting paedophiles." Someone else yelled, "Jimmy Savile."
Protecting paedophiles!
Eventually, Sir Keir was bundled into a police car and driven to safety. The Prime Minister condemned the protesters in a tweet, but his critics have drawn a link between yesterday's violence and what he said in Parliament last week.
This leader of the opposition, a former director of public prosecutions, Mr. Speaker, he spent most of his time prosecuting journalists and failing to prosecute Jimmy Savile.
In Parliament today, the Speaker criticised the protesters, but also had stern words for Mr Johnson.
These sorts of comments only inflame opinions and generate disregard for the House, and it is not acceptable. Our words have consequences, and we should always be mindful of that fact.
The Palace of Westminster has some of the tightest security measures of any building in London. What happened to Sir Keir Starmer once again raises questions about how safe MPs are away from the fortifications of Parliament. And the Labour leader isn't the first high-profile politician to be ambushed in the street by so-called anti-vaxxers. In October, the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove had to be escorted by police after he was surrounded. A government minister defended Mr Johnson.
This link that people are trying to make between those comments and the totally appalling harassment and intimidation that Keir Starmer suffered are getting that wrong, because the people involved have a long track record of doing this to other political leaders, including Michael Gove.
In the 1970s, Sylvia Edwards was assaulted by Jimmy Savile in full view of the cameras during Top of the Pops. Today, she lives in Twickenham. She's horrified at the Prime Minister's comments.
What has Jimmy Savile got to do with parties? To me, it was like, oh God, he's like a little kid throwing his toy out the pram. Why does he need to bring that up? There is no reason for it. He's got caught. Jimmy Savile didn't get caught. He got caught. Why do you need to bring something like that up? It's wrong because, you know, we shouldn't have to suffer like that and listen to that.
In Downing Street, the Prime Minister was reshuffling his ministers. His official spokesperson made it clear he wouldn't apologise. Simon Harris, ITV News, Westminster.
Now, when complete, it will stretch across almost 3.5 kilometres of lakes and waterways just outside the capital. A viaduct that, when finished, will be the UK's longest railway bridge, carrying high-speed trains between London, Birmingham and the north as part of the HS2 project. Building it requires 1,000 enormous concrete segments and a factory larger than the Royal Albert Hall. Our political correspondent Simon Harris has been for a look.
120 tonnes of concrete hanging in the air. It's one of the first of 1,000 pieces which will be slotted together like a giant Lego set to make a viaduct. The 3.5 kilometre bridge will carry the High Speed 2 rail line over rivers, lakes and a canal in the Colne Valley in West London.
Probably the biggest project in Europe, and it's very technically challenging. Also, it's very diverse in terms of the team. We have people from all over the world putting their brains together to overcome the big challenges we have, and it's very exciting to be part of this.
The first bridge sections have been cast in a purpose-built factory next to the M25. For Seb, the viaduct project is a lucky break. He's an engineering student on a work placement, but he's not the only one on a learning curve.
Every day is different, and we've got so many exciting things happening, especially at this stage of the project, where we're just building up the factory and everyone's learning together as we get used to how to make these segments.
This stretch of HS2 is slowly taking shape despite the best efforts of environmental activists who set up protest camps and occupied sites to try to stall the project. They've largely left the Colne Valley, allowing engineers to build a series of temporary concrete and steel jetties across the lakes.
We have built 1 kilometre of temporary platform that will help us build basically the permanent works, so the piers. So these temporary platforms are built over mainly the lake, so it allows us to drive on it bring our material.
The £100 billion railway will eventually run from Euston to Birmingham, mainly in tunnels under the London suburbs and Chilterns, before briefly emerging into daylight just before the new bridge. The viaduct across the Colne Valley is just one part of this huge construction project. It won't be finished for another 3 years, and it could be another decade before high-speed trains are running across it. The design of the viaduct is meant to suggest a pebble skipping across water. HS2 bosses hope it will become an iconic piece of railway architecture. Simon Harris, ITV News, Harefield.